Two figures stand alone on a mountain peak. Below them, there is no world left at all, only gray, endless water where every city, field, and forest used to be. They are the last two people alive. You know a story like this. A drowned world, a chosen few, a vessel riding the waves. Almost every ancient people told one. But the Greek flood does not end the way you expect. It does not end with a rainbow or two of every animal walking down a gangplank. It ends with two old people throwing stones over their shoulders and watching them stand up as human beings. To understand why the gods drowned the world, you have to see what the world had become. The fire Prometheus stole had made mankind clever. The jar Pandora opened had made us mortal and full of pain. And in the long ages that followed, something in the human race went rotten. The age of gold gave way to silver, to bronze, and at last to a final brutal age, the age of iron. It was an age of greed and violence, of broken oaths and bloody hands. Guests were murdered beneath their hosts' roofs. Sons counted the days until their fathers died. Nothing was sacred anymore. The cries of it rose all the way to Olympus, and Zeus, king of the gods, looked down on the human race he ruled and did not like what he saw. But a king does not pass sentence on rumor. So Zeus did something rare. He laid aside his thunder, put on a traveler's worn cloak, and came down to walk the earth as a mortal. He wanted to see for himself whether mankind could truly have fallen as far as the reports claimed. What he found in the mountains of Arcadia was worse than anything he had heard. In Arcadia there ruled a king named Lycaon, a hard, godless man with a cruel, suspicious heart. And it was to his hall, as night fell, that the disguised god came asking shelter. Zeus gave a sign that a god had come among them, and the people began to pray. But Lycaon only sneered at their worship. He did not believe his ragged guest was anything but a man. So the king devised a test. That night, while the stranger slept, he would murder him in his bed. If the guest died like a mortal, then he was immortal, and Lycaon would have lost nothing. But murder alone was not enough for him. Lycaon wanted to know what he was truly dealing with, and so he conceived a cruelty that no sane host could imagine. He took a human hostage held at his court and cut his throat. He boiled and roasted the man's flesh, carried it steaming to the table, and set it before his guest as a meal. Think of what that means. To the god of guests and oaths and the sacred bond of the table, Lycaon offered a plate of murdered human flesh, smiling, to see if the god would notice. Zeus noticed. The full fury of heaven broke loose in that hall. He brought the roof down in fire and thunder, and the godless king fled shrieking into the night. But there was no escaping what he had become. As Lycaon ran, his screams thinned into a howl. His clothes turned to bristling gray hair, his arms to lean legs, his hands to claws. His face stretched into a long, snarling muzzle, and his cruelty froze there forever, in the shape of a wolf, the first werewolf still hungry for blood, hunting the flocks he once ruled. And to Zeus, Lycaon was not one wicked man among the good. He was proof. If a king would do this, then the rot had gone all the way down. The whole race was beyond saving. The king of the gods made his decision on the road back to Olympus, and it was absolute. Mankind, every last one of them, would be wiped from the face of the earth. He summoned the gods to council in the shining hall of Olympus and told them his verdict. The human experiment had failed. The earth itself had to be scoured clean and begun again. His first thought was fire, to burn the world with his thunderbolts, but he stopped. A blaze that great might leap past the earth and catch the heavens themselves and set all creation alight. So not fire water. He would drown the world instead. And to do it, he reached first for the winds, locking away the north wind that scatters the clouds and dries the rain. Then he loosed the south wind. its face streaming dark water, fog for a beard, storm for wings, rain pouring from its hair. Where it flew, the sky came down as endless rain. And it did not stop, not for a day, not for many. And then Zeus called on his brother, the god of the sea, to open the deep and help him drown the world. Poseidon struck the earth with his trident, and the ground heaved. Rivers tore loose from their banks and ran wild, and the gray sea rose up and rolled in over the land. The world went under. Fields and vineyards, villages and towns, then whole cities all drowned. People fled to rooftops, to hilltops, to the last high branches, and the water climbed after them. Boats drifted where wheat had grown. Dolphins blundered through drowned oak woods. The last peaks slipped under, and out of a whole world of people, one small wooden chest still rode the flood, 2 souls alive inside. Inside that chest were a man and a woman. The man was Deucalion, and of all the people on earth, he alone Zeus had judged truly good, just, gentle, and faithful to the gods. And Deucalion was no ordinary man. He was the son of the Titan Prometheus, the same far-seeing Titan who had stolen fire from mankind and who had never stopped trying to protect us. Beside him was his wife Pyrrha, as righteous as her husband, and bound to this whole tragic story by blood. For Pyrrha was the daughter of Prometheus and of Pandora herself. Stop on that. The one woman chosen to survive the flood and to become the mother of all people after it was the daughter of the woman who first loosed suffering into the world. Prometheus, whose name means forethought, had seen the flood coming long before the first cloud gathered. And he had gone to his son with a warning and a single instruction: build a chest. So Deucalion built it, and when the rains came, and the sea climbed, and the screaming world went under, he and Pyrrha climbed inside and gave themselves to the water. For 9 days and 9 nights they drifted on a sea with no shore and no bottom, under a sky with no sun. 2 human beings alone on the face of a drowned world. And on the 10th day, the little chest scraped against something solid. They had come to rest on the high twin peaks of Mount Parnassus, the one place on earth the flood had not swallowed. Slowly, the rain stopped, the waters began to sink, and the drowned world rose back into the light inch by inch, slick with gray mud, washed bare and utterly, perfectly silent. Deucalion and Pyrrha stepped out onto the cold mountainside and looked at what was left. No voices, no smoke from any hearth, no other living soul anywhere in all the world, only the 2 of them. They understood then why they had been spared, because they alone had kept faith with the gods, and they understood the price of it. They were alive, and they were entirely alone. They were old. The world was empty, and even if they lived 100 more years, 2 people could never refill a drowned earth. The human race had ended, and it had ended with them. So they did the only thing left to them. They went down to a shrine half buried in flood mud, the ancient sanctuary of Themis, goddess of law and prophecy, and they knelt and prayed. Deucalion's prayer was not for himself. If the gods can still be moved by a faithful heart, he said, then give us back our lost people. Show us how to begin the human race again. And the goddess answered. But her answer came as a riddle, strange and at first horrifying. Leave my temple, she said. Veil your heads, loosen your robes. And as you go, said the oracle, throw behind you the bones of your great mother. Then the sacred voice fell silent and left them alone with those terrible words. Pyrrha wept and refused. Scatter her own mother's bones across the ground like rubbish. She would sooner die than commit so monstrous an impiety against the dead. And here is the moment the whole story turns on. Because Deucalion did not obey the words, and he did not despair at them. He thought about them. He turned the riddle over and over. and slowly it broke open in his mind. "The Great Mother," he said quietly. "She does not mean your mother or mine. She means the mother of us all. She means the earth, and the bones of the earth, the bones of our Great Mother, are her stones." It was a guess, but it was a guess built on wisdom and on reverence. They hardly dared believe it, but there was nothing to lose, so they veiled their faces and loosened their garments, and bent to gather the cold stones scattered across the mountainside. And then, not daring to look behind them, they began to throw the stones back over their shoulders, one after another, scattering them across the muddy ground as the goddess had commanded. What happened next, no eye was meant to see. Where each stone struck the ground, it began to change. The hard rock softening, swelling, losing its edges and taking on a rough, growing shape. The damp parts became flesh. The veins of the stone became the veins of a body, and what had been a lump of mountain rock slowly stood up and drew its first human breath. The stones Deucalion threw rose up as men. The stones Pyrrha threw rose up as women. Across the bare slopes, out of the very bones of the earth, a whole new human race climbed into the light. And this, the Greeks said, is the secret folded into their own name. They called a people Lawoi, and the word for stone was Laius. "We are the people," they said, "because we came from the stones." Ask why the gods would make the new race out of rock, of all things, and you reach the dark heart of how the Greeks saw themselves. They did not imagine themselves molded from soft clay or breathed gently into life. They were a people born from stone, hard, heavy, enduring, made to bear weight and to outlast almost anything. A race thrown up out of the mountainside was a race bred for toil and grief and survival. That, the Greeks believed, was the truth of human life. It is hard, and we are made to endure it. But Deucalion and Pyrrha were not only the makers of a race of strangers. They had children of their own, true-born, and the first of them was a son named Helen. And from Helen, the Greeks took their name. To this day, they do not call themselves Greeks. That is a Roman word. They call themselves Hellenes, the children of Deucalion's son. Now, you have surely noticed how much of this you already know. A wicked world, a righteous man warned in time, a flood that drowns everything, a vessel, a mountain, a new beginning. And you might think the Greeks simply borrowed the story of Noah. They did not. The truth is far stranger and far older than that. Flood myths are everywhere in the ancient world, and the oldest of them come not from Greece or from the Bible, but from Mesopotamia, 1,000 years and more before either. There, a man named Utnapishtim, and before him Zeus, survived a world-ending flood in a great chest warned like Deucalion by a god who would not let mankind end completely. The Greek flood is not a copy of any of them. It is a cousin, one branch of humanity's oldest shared memory, that once the world drowned, and a faithful few were spared to begin again. But only the Greeks ended their flood like this. Not with two of every animal, not with a covenant in the sky, with 2 old people and a handful of stones that stood up and walked. A world found wanting and washed clean. A race remade from the bones of the earth, harder than the one before. That is the Greek beginning again, and beyond it wait gods, seasons, and 1,000 stories still to be told. Thank you for watching. If this tale stayed with you, subscribe. A new myth arrives every week, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Until then, may the old stories keep their hold on you.